this video, I'm going to talk to you about how I started learning Japanese and Korean and how I was able to go from very beginner to intermediate level within 4 months. So this video will be split into 4 sections. The first section will be how to get started with learning Japanese and Korean. The second section will be how I studied these 2 languages, what sort of resources I used, my methods with using these resources. The third section will be what do you need to move past beginner into the intermediate stage. And then finally, the 4th section will be what can you do when you feel stuck while starting to learn, and how you cannot give up. Okay, so section 1, how to get started with Korean and Japanese. A lot of people I know are kind of hesitant to start learning these languages for a variety of reasons. These languages are kind of like daunting. That's why I feel like a lot of people sort of hesitate to get started. But honestly, I feel like if you've made the decision to learn Japanese or Korean, or if you're kind of on the fence, you know, like the steps to get started aren't super hard, and I will walk you through what a good way to do that will be, so you're not super overwhelmed. So step 1, I would say, is to learn the alphabet. This might seem like kind of a no-brainer, but getting a good foundation for the alphabet is super important. So whether you start learning a language, or you like build a house, or you learn something else, what I'm trying to say is all of these things require a good foundation. You can sort of think of the alphabet as your foundation. So you want to have a really strong foundation. So you want to take up the time to properly learn hiragana, katakana for Japanese, or hangul for Korean. So it's not enough to just sort of Google like chart of hiragana or like chart of hangul. Like it's not enough to just sort of Google that and like glance over it and be like, okay, I got it, like yay, I can move on. Not yet. So you really need to spend some time to really get that down in your brain, so that when you move on later, you're not like stumbling over the basics. So step number 2 can honestly kind of be done in conjunction with step 1. So step 2, I would say, is to look around for resources. Again, it might seem kind of like, well, duh, like I have to find resources, but I'm saying that you should really take time to Google and see sort of all the different resources that lie on the web or off the web, like textbooks. Anyway, my point is that there's so many resources, and I think that you don't need to be stuck with just one. For example, if you Google how to learn Korean and you find like the first link, like yeah, maybe the first link is actually the best link, but maybe it's not, and maybe it's not for you. So play around and see what you think would fit you the best. As for what I used, I will tell you that in the next section. Before we go there though, the 3rd step of how to get started with learning Korean or Japanese is that you should make a study plan. Honestly, you don't even have to have a physical study plan. You just have to have an idea of what you want to do, when you want to do it by, how you're going to do it. You want an idea of your learning plan from point A to point B, and it doesn't have to be super detailed or super rigid. It's not like I have to stick to this plan or else everything's gonna crumble, like I can't learn this anymore, like my plan is all ruined, like I'm never gonna get to intermediate. Like no, it's not like that. So basically, know where you are, know where you want to go, and plan out how to get there. Moving on to section 2, which is going to be how I studied and what resources I used and my method with using these resources. I guess we will split this into grammar and vocabulary. For grammar, Korean, honestly, my one true love is this website called How to Study Korean. I'm sure you might have heard of it because it is just amazing. It's an amazing website for learning grammar. The way it's structured is that there are short lessons, and these lessons comprise of units. So currently, I think there's 6 full units. So the first couple units, are for beginner, the next couple are intermediate, and then you get into advanced. Unit 1 and I think maybe Unit 2 are grammar lessons that you need to know as a beginner in Korean. So since they are split into lessons and units, my plan at the beginning was to just do a couple lessons a day, maybe 2 or 3 lessons, if I'm feeling good 4 lessons, if they're short 5, it doesn't really matter. But the point is that in the beginning, my schedule was just to do these lessons every day and get a grasp of basic Korean grammar. And then since these lessons are then split into units, I think every unit has like 25 lessons maybe. So then after each unit, you need to go back and review all the lessons that you learned. So I personally hate reviewing. It's just so much more fun to like learn new things, you know? So I'm really terrible at going back and reviewing all the lessons that I learned. But you gotta do it, because if you don't review, like nothing is gonna stick, honestly. And it's especially important in the beginning because, as I mentioned before, you need to build a good foundation. And the beginning, the first grammar lessons that you learn, the beginner grammar lessons, are very, very important. Because if you don't get a good grasp of those, then it's gonna be hard for you to keep going on. So kind of in line with that, after I finished the second unit of How to Study Korean, I switched resources. So the reason being this is because I think, you know, like every resource is kind of written differently, and people explain differently. So it's a really good idea to sort of get like a comprehensive view, and a different viewpoint. So for example, like if this guy explains it in this way, maybe he didn't touch on something as much, and so then the second resource will maybe fill in the whole picture for you. So I use the Korean Grammar in Use textbook. It's really just like a simple textbook that's meant to give you these grammar lessons like one by one. They're sort of grouped by like category, which is not exactly how to study Korean is grouped by. It's not like How to Study Korean is a little bit more like scattered, I think. So it was good to have a resource that could sort of group things to like help your brain put things together. So there's that, a 6-to-1 resource. And I've mentioned that Talk to Me in Korean is also a very, very popular resource, and a lot of people prefer it better because I think it seems more like fun. And How to Study Korean can be a little dense. It can be dense, and I guess not as fun. So some people kind of get turned off by that. And so if you like Talk to Me in Korean, definitely go for that. I'm sure it's a great resource. A lot of people are using it. So that goes back to, you know, section 1 of find your resource, like find the one that's for you. So now moving on to what I used for Japanese. When I first started, again, like I'm a big grammar person, so I immediately found Tae Kim's Grammar Guide, which is sort of like How to Study Korean in that it's one website with a comprehensive list/guide of grammar. So it's good in that it's a pretty structured list. I think unlike How to Study Korean, it's a little more clear. The lessons are sort of ordered in a way that makes it like easy to find grammar principles, and you can kind of see like where your journey is going. But anyway, Tae Kim is a great guide for grammar. Again, I think in my mind, while it's supposed to be comprehensive, and you know it kind of is comprehensive, it didn't quite fill in everything for me. So in addition to Tae Kim, I picked up a textbook of Genki, which is again really popular textbook for. There's a version for beginners, and so I took that one. I think I really enjoyed Genki. While I think it's supposed to be made for classroom use, maybe, but I think it's still really useful even if you're self-studying, because like it really does explain the grammar in an easy and clear way. So again, it was a good supplementary, and I think both Tae Kim and the Genki textbooks, like when I used them together, it really gave me a good view of beginner grammar principles and, you know, moving into intermediate grammar as well. So with Tae Kim, since the website is kind of laid out as like one whole thing, it was easy for me to just sort of like read the lessons. And so that's partly why I also did switch to Genki after I finished Tae Kim, is because I was sort of just like, you know, just reading, and as I mentioned before, like that's not enough to just read. So Genki was good because I could take a step back and go over all the grammar that I learned from Tae Kim, and the Genki lessons, you know, are very structured. So it was easy to sort of plan out to do like 1 lesson or 2 lessons a day. There's like audio listening files, which are good listening practice for beginners. And then there's like some writing exercises, whatever. Doing these exercises helped ingrain these principles into my brain versus just sort of like reading about the grammar principle and then like not doing anything about it like after I learned it. So yeah, that was good. It kept me accountable in my grammar learning journey. And yeah, okay. Okay, so moving on from grammar to vocabulary. So I started off just using Quizlet because that's kind of what I used throughout high school and kind of in university to learn like terms. So that's what I knew, and so I just started with Quizlet and added my own cards. So I thought this was kind of time consuming, and it felt like I wasn't really remembering words that well, and so I tried to look into other vocabulary sources. And as a lot of you may already come across this or are using this, I found Anki, which is a spaced repetition system for those who don't know. So you might see me use Anki in some of my videos, my study videos, to review vocab, but I think Anki is a better alternative to something like Quizlet because of the spaced repetition system. So it's designed basically for you to review words just when your brain is about to forget them, so it'll bring up the word. I think that's the idea behind it. So the spaced repetition system is great, and Anki, I think, is very flexible with how you can learn vocabulary. Anki has a site where there's a bunch of extensions, and this kind of seems a little scary at first. I know when I first started using it, I was like, how in the world does this work? This looks so confusing, and like the app was kind of like it looks simple in a way that's like, is this meant for me to use? I don't know. Anyway, but I just did a little bit of digging on the web. I found some good extensions, and I found some great vocabulary decks so that I didn't have to make my own words because I'm lazy. So for Japanese, there's the core deck. So there's core 2000, there's core 6000, I think there's like core 10,000 or whatever. I use the core 6000 deck. Anyway, and all these decks, the core decks, have sentences, and they also have audio files. Each card not only has the word, but it has a sentence where you can see the word in context, and it has the audio file so you can listen to the pronunciation. And this is really helpful. You don't just see the word kind of out of context, you have a bunch of information to help you remember this word. So now my Korean deck, I use Korean by Evita, and this deck is like very simple, like it just has the word, which is not ideal, but since it seemed like the largest Korean deck with like the most common words and stuff, I chose it. And what I do is that if a word keeps coming up and I can't remember it really, since there's like no sentences or anything, I just go to the web, like I go to a dictionary, like Naver dictionary, whatever, and I look up the word, review like all the example sentences to check out pronunciation. So I do that for words that I just like that just keep escaping my mind. It might be a good idea to try and get sentences incorporated into your deck if you're feeling motivated. But yeah, Anki for vocabulary is really great. Okay, so moving on to the third section. What do you need in order to move past beginner? So I will outline, I think, 5 main points. So to get started, the first point is to put in consistent effort and time. So a lot of people stress this advice all the time, and it is for good reason. So you can't really expect to go from beginner to intermediate in a few months if you don't have a consistent learning schedule, and if you don't actually put in the time it takes studying every day, every other day, whatever. For me, in the beginning, I studied around more or less like an hour or 2 a day, which I think for me is manageable. And so like I'm not studying like 5 hours a day or anything. You just carve out an hour or so every day, or try to do like 5 days a week, whatever. Keeping a consistent schedule where you're incorporating language learning as part of your lifestyle is the mindset that you need to have in order to move past the beginner level. So again, it's better to spread out your studying rather than study like 4 or 5 hours one day and do that once a week versus an hour a day, which keeps you on track. The second point will be to review what you've already learned. So again, I talked upon this point, but I will dive a little bit deeper. Learning new things is important, and you need to learn a lot of things in order to get to the intermediate level. But if you don't review those things, then you're just going to forget them. And so it's going to be useless. All the time that you've spent learning new things is going to be put to waste if you don't go back and review all the grammar points, the vocabulary that you already learned, so that you can drill them in your head. The third point would be to practice active learning. Don't just take some notes and then read over your notes and call that like reviewing. I'm definitely guilty of this, but it is reviewing in a sense, and it is helpful to a certain degree, but you're not getting like the maximum potential from your review. Don't just read over your notes, don't just review your flashcards. Like, once you have the basic grammar points down and you know some vocab, use that and actively practice with it. So the 4 core skills of language learning, I would say, are read, write, speak, and listen. And so when I say practice active learning, you want to sort of engage all 4 of those core skills. For reading, like, try to find passages in Japanese or Korean, and they don't have to be super hard. Like, even just textbooks like Genki for Japanese, the reading passages in each lesson, like, that's good. Do whatever you can, get whatever you can, and just try to practice reading a lot. Same with listening, like, find some podcasts for beginners. Writing, it might be hard to start, but I think you should just start with like the basic sentences. Just try to write about your day in a basic way. Like, today I got up at 7 and I ate cereal for breakfast, like something like that, like something really simple. You don't have to write an essay or anything, like you don't have to be some sort of novelist. As a beginner, just try to write those basic sentences, and that'll help your brain sort of put the grammar and vocabulary that you learn to use. Point 4 is to get familiar with how Japanese sounds and how Korean sounds. Like, when I started studying and then I watched TV in those languages, I noticed my brain could pick up a little bit more. A lot of common phrases that you just hear over and over again, or like sentence patterns, whatever, you start to pick up that more. So it's really, really helpful, and it gets more helpful the more you learn and the more you watch or listen in conjunction. So TV, podcasts, whatever, it doesn't have to be K-drama, it doesn't have to be anime, whatever, it can be like an educational podcast or whatever. The point is, try to find as much native listening material as you can, because that really helps your brain learn how the language is used naturally. And then caveat, with anime, like, a lot of the language is not exactly natural, but slice of life anime or stuff like that where you can find daily conversations is very helpful. And honestly, even if it's like action or something, just be aware that like some words characters use might be not what you would say, but the rest of the dialogue is actually still a very helpful starting point or like reference point. So, and then the 5th point, I would say, finally, what you need to do in order to move past the beginner stage is to ask a lot of questions. If you don't understand anything, you should try and do everything that you can to sort of figure out like what you're having problems with. So if it's just like a simple grammar point, like you read it through the textbook and it's like not really sticking, but like you kind of like know what's going on, but like not really, dig deeper and find out exactly what's going on there. That'll really help you get more familiar with the language and also drill that into your brain, just so you're not like, learning things and then just like kind of like half learning them, like it's not entirely ingrained in your brain, but like you kind of know what it is. But so move past that and do a lot of research. And a lot of forums, like there's like Hi Native, if you just Google like your question or whatever, there are so many forums that have like native speakers giving answers to grammar points and stuff, and that's really helpful. And then there's also just like web dictionaries, like Naver Dictionary. It has example sentences from random news sources and like random dictionaries, but also it has VLive subtitles, which is really helpful because you can see how people like use the words in real life. So definitely look around those, look around the web, and then also like Reddit. The subreddits like Learn Japanese and Korean, those subreddits are actually really good for asking questions. I know like Learn Japanese has like I think it's a weekly thread where you can just ask any questions that you want, and then for the Korean subreddit, you just like post whatever questions you want. And those are really helpful because you get a reply really fast, and you can pretty much get most of your questions answered like just like that. Also, these subreddits, as well as like the online forums, even if you don't ask your own questions, it's helpful to go and browse and see what other people are asking, because sometimes you run across something that like you kind of had a question about, or like it's not like super clear in your mind, and if you read through that, that'll help you learn. So learn from other people's questions as well. So now we are finally at our last section, section 4 of what can you do when you just feel stuck, and how you can move past that rut and not give up the language. A lot of people have been saying like, I've been learning this language for X amount of time, like a year or whatever, 2 years, and I haven't gotten anywhere. I think if you sort of think about why that's the case, you'll sort of find that either 1, they just weren't able to put enough time in it, or 2, there's just something that they couldn't wrap their heads around, and then that like demotivated them, so then they just ended up giving up or just like coming to a standstill. I would say in order for you to move past this stage of being stuck, you need to first identify what exactly is the problem. So is the problem that you don't have enough time, or does the problem lie with something in the language itself? So if it's the latter, do you just not understand the grammar or sentence structure? Do you keep forgetting the verb conjugations? Does your brain just not retain the stuff that you've been learning well? Like, what exactly is the problem that you're having? It's important to dive in and pinpoint that. Once you pinpoint that, you can address it, right? For example, if you're having trouble with the sentence structure, because the sentence structure is most likely pretty different from what your native language is, if that's the case, like, Google is your friend. If you spend a lot of time trying to like do some research on sentence structure, look at examples and sort of pick out where the verb is, where the subject is, etc., take that time to do like a deep analysis of that'll really help, right? So, and then if you're looking online and you can't seem to find anything, again, as I mentioned before, online forums are very helpful. There are very knowledgeable people out there, and they are willing to help you and give you some really great explanations on what you're having trouble with. So definitely don't just get into the mindset of, I'm not learning anything, I still can't understand anything. Get out of this mindset and get into the mindset of where are my challenges and what can I do to sort of alleviate those challenges and continue to learn. And like, finally, I know I've mentioned this a lot, but the whole thing that ties this together is you having time. So again, you need time and you need consistency in order for this whole plan to work. Like, if you don't have either of those, it's going to be really difficult for you to move from beginner to intermediate in just like 4 months or a few months. So make sure that you're making time to do studying, and then follow all of the tips I've mentioned before on how to study, what not to do, etc. And if you do so, I think that you'll be on your way and you won't be bogged down. These are the tips that I have for you. Hopefully, if you follow some aspects of my method and some tips, I hope that you'll be on your way to becoming an intermediate from a beginner in 4 months, more or less. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to ask me in the comments. You can also message me on Instagram. I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope you have some concrete tips and advice and resources that you can use to go from being a beginner to intermediate. Let me know how your journey goes. Happy to talk, and I will see you next time.